The book of Genesis ends with a coffin, a dead man in a box in a foreign country who used his final breath to make his family swear an oath. It is one of the strangest endings in all of Scripture, and everything you are about to see is going to lead there. So keep it in the back of your mind, because almost everyone who knows this book knows it in pieces. A garden with a forbidden tree, a man who built a boat while his neighbors laughed, an old couple promised a child they were far too old to have, a ladder reaching into heaven, a coat of many colors, torn and soaked in blood. We learn them as separate little stories, told one at a time, with years in between, as if they were beads that happened to fall into the same box. But that is not what Genesis actually is. Read it straight through, start to finish, the way it was meant to be read, and something starts to happen. The beads turn out to be strung on a single thread. The stories are not a collection. They are one story, and it is the story of a single promise made in the opening pages, in a garden, over the wreckage of the very first disaster. A promise that one day, out of one bloodline, someone would be born who would undo everything that had just gone wrong. And here is the strange part, the part that makes this whole book so much more gripping than the flannel board version we were handed as children. That promise should have died, not once, again and again and again. The very first family produces a murderer. The whole human race gets wiped off the map in a flood, down to 8 people on a boat. The man chosen to carry the promise is old and childless with a barren wife. His long-awaited son is laid on an altar with a knife raised over his chest. The next heir is a con man running for his life. And the family that carries the whole thing forward gets starved down to a handful and nearly erased by famine. Every single time, the thread should have snapped, and every single time, against all odds, it holds. Something keeps reaching into the story and refusing to let the promise die, which brings us back to that ending. Because the book of Genesis, the book of beginnings, the book of light and stars and gardens, does not close on a throne or a mountaintop or a miracle. It closes in a foreign country, on the far side of everything the promise was pointing toward, with that same oath from a dying man still hanging in the air. Do not leave me here. So this is not going to be 5 little stories. This is going to be one. We are going to follow the thread from the very first word, through every place it nearly broke, all the way to that coffin, and we are going to find out what that dead man was waiting for. Because once you see the thread, you cannot unsee it, and you will never read the first book of the Bible the same way again. Let's begin where it begins. In the dark, before there was anything at all. In the beginning, there is nothing that has a shape. The very first sentence of the Bible drops you into a world that is not yet a world. The old words describe it as formless and empty and dark, a deep and shapeless ocean with a wind sweeping over the face of it. That is the starting point. Not fire, not war, not a hero, just a dark, watery void, waiting. And into that emptiness comes the thing that starts everything. Not a hand, not a weapon, a voice. God speaks. And the very first thing he says is, "Let there be light," and there is light. Sit with how strange and simple that is. The universe does not begin with a struggle. It begins with a word spoken into the dark, and the dark obeys. Light pours in where there was none, and the first thing God does with it is separate it from the darkness and call the one day and the other night. And that becomes the pattern for everything that follows in these opening lines. Creation is not God building furniture. It is God taking a formless, chaotic mess and piece by piece, speaking order into it, dividing, naming, setting boundaries, turning a void into a home. Day by day, the shapeless thing takes shape. On one day, the waters split, and a sky opens up between them like a great blue tent stretched over the world. On the next, the seas draw back and dry land rises up out of them, and the bare ground answers the voice by bursting into green grass and plants and trees heavy with seed and fruit, each carrying inside itself the power to make more of its own kind. Then lights are hung in the great vault overhead. a greater light to rule the day and a lesser one to govern the night, and the sky fills with stars. And notice what God keeps doing at the end of each stage. He looks at what he has made and he calls it good, over and over. Good, good, it is good. This is not a reluctant creation. This is a maker delighting in the making. Then the world fills with living things. The waters swarm with fish and the great creatures of the sea. The skies fill with birds. The land brings forth animals of every kind, wild and tame, creatures that creep and creatures that run. A dead, dark ocean has become a roaring, breathing, teeming world, packed corner to corner with life. And everything so far has been made by command. Let there be, let the waters teem, let the land produce. The voice speaks, and it happens. But now, at the very peak of the whole sequence, the tone changes. The pace slows. Because God is about to make one more thing, and he does not make it the way he made the rest. Instead of simply commanding it into being, God pauses and speaks as if in deliberation. Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish and the birds and the animals, over all the earth. This is the hinge of the entire chapter. Every other creature is made according to its kind, animal after animal, plant after plant. But the human being is made according to a different pattern, made in the image of God himself. And the text slows down and says it 3 times in one breath, as if it cannot be repeated enough. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Whatever else this ancient book is about to tell you about human beings, and it is about to tell you some very dark things, it plants this flag first before anything goes wrong. You are not an accident in the swarm. You are made to look like the one who made everything. And then, with the whole universe finished and humming with life, God does the most surprising thing in the entire sequence. He stops. On the 7th day, the text says, God rested from all his work, and he blessed the 7th day and made it holy. Now think about that. God does not need rest. He is not tired. So the resting is not about exhaustion. It is about arrival. It is the Maker stepping back from a finished world and simply enjoying it, dwelling in it, at peace in the middle of the good thing he has made. 6 days are about work, about filling and forming and ordering. The 7th is about rest and delight and being present. And that 7th day is the only thing in the whole creation account that God calls holy. Not a mountain, not a temple, not a person, but a day, a rhythm of rest woven into time itself. The goal of all that furious creative work was never just more stuff. It was a world at rest, with God dwelling in it, at home. Hold on to that picture too, because everything the rest of the Bible aches toward is a way back to exactly this. A good world, God present in it, and everyone finally at rest. But hold that peace lightly, because this finished resting world already has one loose thread woven into it, one tree, one single choice, and in a matter of pages, everything is going to turn on it. And the second creation account, the one that follows right after, zooms all the way in on how that happened. And it is intimate in a way that is easy to miss. It says, God formed the man from the dust of the ground. The Hebrew makes a pun you cannot hear in English. The man is Adam, and the ground is Adamah. He is, quite literally, an earthling, a creature of the dirt. And then God does something he does for no other creature. He leans in close and breathes into the man's nostrils the breath of life, and the man becomes a living being. Picture it. The maker of galaxies, kneeling in the dirt, giving mouth to a shape of clay. That is the origin the Bible gives you. Half dust, half divine breath. A body from the ground and a life from the mouth of God. And that strange double nature, earthbound and heaven-breathed at the same time, is going to explain almost everything about the ache and the glory of the whole human story that follows. And then God plants a garden. A specific place in the east, called Eden, which carries the sense of delight, of luxury, of a place where nothing is lacking. He puts the man there, and fills it with every tree that is pleasing to the eye and good for food. A river runs out of it and splits into 4 to water the whole world. It is paradise in the original sense of the word, a walled garden of abundance where a human being and his maker share the same ground. And the man is not put there to lie in a hammock. He is given work, real work, to tend the garden and to keep it, and he is given authority, brought every animal to see what he would name them. The first human vocation is not toil. It is gardening and naming, cultivating a good world and giving language to it. But right in the middle of this perfect place, God plants 2 particular trees, and one of them is going to matter more than anything else in the entire book. In the center of the garden stands the tree of life, and beside it, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and God gives the man a single command, the first command in all of Scripture. You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for on the day you eat of it, you will surely die. Notice the shape of that. It is almost entirely a yes. You may eat from any tree, from every tree. This whole garden of delight is yours. There is exactly one no, one boundary, one tree in a garden of thousands that is not his to take. And here is why that one tree matters so much. That single boundary is the thing that makes the man a person and not a puppet. A creature that cannot say no cannot really say yes. Love that is forced is not love at all. So the one forbidden tree is the space where the human being gets to freely choose to trust his maker or not. It is the door left unlocked in a house full of open rooms. It is not a trap. It is the price of being free. But an unlocked door is also, by definition, a door that can be opened. And someone in that garden is about to notice exactly that. Because the man is alone, and God says the first thing in all of creation that is not good. It is not good for the man to be alone. So God causes a deep sleep to fall on him. And from his own side, from a rib taken from within him, God builds a woman and brings her to the man. And the man, who has named every animal without a flicker of emotion, finally erupts into the first recorded human words, and they are poetry. This, at last, is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She is not made from his head to rule him or from his feet to be trampled, the old teachers used to say, but from his side to stand beside him. 2 people, naked and unashamed, in a garden of delight, with their maker walking among them in the cool of the day, and one single tree they have promised not to touch. This is the world as it was supposed to be. A good creation, a human being made in the image of God, meaningful work, deep companionship, and the presence of the Maker himself, all of it held together by trust. Remember this picture because you are about to watch it break. Everything that goes wrong in the rest of this book, every murder, every flood, every famine, every knife, is the long shadow of what happens next. Somewhere in the branches of that one forbidden tree, something is waiting, and it can speak. The text introduces the serpent with a single loaded word: crafty. More crafty, it says, than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. And the very first thing this creature does is not attack. It does not hiss or strike. It asks a question, and it is a small masterpiece of poison. Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? Look at what that question does. God said they could eat from every tree but one. The serpent flips it and makes God sound stingy, restrictive, like a maker who fenced off the whole garden. It takes a command that was almost entirely generous, one small no inside an ocean of yes, and repaints it as a cage. That is the oldest trick there is. Make the good gift sound like a theft. Make the one loving boundary sound like the whole story. And the woman corrects it, at first. No, she says, we may eat from the trees. It is only the tree in the middle we may not touch, or we will die. But the serpent has her talking now, and it goes in for the real work. You will not surely die, it tells her. And then comes the lie that is under every lie that will ever follow in this book. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Hear what it is actually saying. Your Maker is holding out on you. He is keeping you small on purpose. He is afraid of what you will become. The path to becoming everything you could be does not run through trusting Him. It runs around Him. Take it for yourself. He is the obstacle, not the source. And she looks at the tree, and Genesis slows down to show you exactly how desire works, because it is describing something you have felt 1,000 times. She sees that the tree is good for food, that it is a delight to the eyes, and that it is desirable to make one wise, good for the body, beautiful to look at, and a shortcut to something she wants. Every temptation in human history is folded into that one sentence. She takes the fruit, she eats, and she gives some to her husband, who the text quietly notes was with her, standing right there, saying nothing, and he eats too. And in that one bite, the whole picture from the last section, the garden, the trust, the walking with God in the cool of the day, cracks straight down the middle. And what did they get for it? Not godhood. The serpent promised their eyes would open, and in a bitter, twisting way, it was telling the truth. Their eyes do open, but the first thing they see is not glory, it is themselves. For the first time, they know they are naked, and they are ashamed, and they sew fig leaves together to hide. The first fruit of trying to become gods is not power, it is shame. It is the sudden, sick need to cover up, to hide what you are. And then they hear the sound of God walking in the garden, in the cool of the day, the way He always had. And for the first time in the history of the world, the man and the woman do not run toward that sound. They run from it. They hide among the trees. The relationship that the whole garden was built to hold has been shattered, and you can measure the size of the break by one detail. They are now afraid of the footsteps they used to love. And God calls out the saddest question in the Bible: where are you? Not because He does not know, because they are lost, and He is coming to find them. And what follows is the first blame, the first excuses, the unraveling of everything. The man blames the woman, and in the same breath blames God for giving her to him. The woman blames the serpent. Nobody says the two words that could have started to heal it: I sinned. And so God speaks judgment over the whole scene, and it lands on everyone. The serpent is cursed to crawl. The woman will bear children in pain, and there will now be friction and struggle in what was meant to be partnership. The man will fight the very ground he was made from, wrestling thorns and sweat out of the dirt for his bread all the days of his life. And then, the sentence that hangs over the entire rest of the book: dust you are, and to dust you will return. The earthling Adam, made of the ground, Adamah, is going to go back into it. Death has entered the world, but hidden right in the middle of that judgment, spoken to the serpent of all things, is the single most important sentence in the book of Genesis, and it is the hinge the whole book turns on. Because before God pronounces the curses on the humans, He turns to the serpent, and He makes a promise. He says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. Stop and really hear that. In the darkest moment in the story so far, with paradise collapsing and death entering the world, God plants a promise. One day, out of the woman, out of her line, will come an offspring, a descendant, who will crush the head of the very thing that ruined everything. Evil will wound him. It will strike his heel, but he will crush its head. This is the thread. This is the promise the whole story is about to spend itself protecting. Everything that follows in this book, the whole desperate story of one bloodline that keeps almost dying, is the story of God protecting the line that this promised one will come from. The serpent has heard it too. And from this moment on, there is a target on that bloodline. And then, before he sends them out, God does something tender that is easy to read straight past. The humans had covered themselves with fig leaves, flimsy, temporary, their own poor attempt to fix their shame. And God, the text says, makes garments of skin and clothes them himself. To make garments of skin, something has to die. The first death in the Bible is not a human being, it is an animal, killed by God, to cover the shame of the people he still loves, even as he disciplines them. It is the first hint of a pattern that will run through the entire Bible, that covering the guilt of human beings costs a life. But they cannot stay. They are sent out of the garden, and God stations cherubim and a flaming, turning sword to guard the way back to the tree of life. The gate of Eden closes, and humanity is on the outside of it, east of Eden, for the rest of the story. So the first family is out in the hard world now, under the promise and under the curse at the same time, and they do the most human thing imaginable. They have children, 2 sons, Cain, the older, who works the ground, and Abel, the younger, who keeps the flocks. And the moment they grow up, the crack that started in the garden opens into something far worse, because this is where the very first act of worship in the Bible turns into the very first murder. Both brothers bring an offering to God. Abel brings the best of his flock, the fat portions of the firstborn, the finest he has. Cain brings some of the fruit of the ground. And God looks with favor on Abel's offering, but not on Cain's. The text does not spell out every reason, but it drops a heavy hint. One brother brought his best, the other brought some. One gave the first fruits, the other gave leftovers. And Cain's face falls, and it fills up with a rage that has nowhere to go but sideways, at his own brother. And God, astonishingly, comes to Cain before he does anything, and warns him gently, like a father grabbing a child's arm at the edge of a road. "Why are you angry?" he says. "If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it." There it is again, the same choice from the garden, handed to the next generation. The unlocked door. Sin is crouching right outside it like a predator, and Cain is told, plainly, "You can rule this. You do not have to open the door." And Cain opens it. He says to his brother, "Let us go out to the field." And in the field, away from everyone, Cain rises up against his brother Abel and kills him. The first human being ever born becomes the first murderer, and his victim is his own brother. 2 generations out of paradise, and one half of the human race has already killed the other half. And here is where the thread nearly snaps for the very first time, because think about who just died. Abel was the righteous one, the one whose worship pleased God, the kind of son through whom you might expect the promised line to run. And he is dead in a field, with no children, murdered by his own brother. And Cain, the killer, is marked and sent away to wander east of Eden, further out than his parents ever went. So where does the promise go now? The good son is gone. The bad son is exiled. The line that is supposed to carry the offspring who crushes the serpent looks for a moment like it has been cut off before it even started. And then, quietly, at the very end of the chapter, comes one of those sentences that is easy to skim and impossible to overstate. Adam and Eve have another son, and they name him Seth, which sounds like the word for granted or appointed, because Eve says, "God has granted me another child in place of Abel, since Cain killed him." The thread does not snap. A new son is appointed, and through Seth, the text says, people began to call on the name of the Lord. The promise survives its first brush with death. But the world these children are being born into is getting darker by the generation, and it is about to get so dark that God will decide to wash the whole thing away. The generations pile up fast after Seth. There is a long list of names, fathers and sons stretching down the page, people living and having children and dying, the human race spreading out and multiplying across the earth exactly as it was made to do. but something is spreading with them. The text says that as humanity increased on the face of the ground, so did its wickedness. And then it gives you a single crushing line about the inside of the human heart. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. Not sometimes, not mostly, only evil continually. The crack that started with one piece of fruit in one garden has now run through the entire species, and the world Cain's violence began has become a world where violence fills the earth from one end to the other. But that long list of names is not as flat as it looks. Two family lines are growing side by side inside it, and they are heading in opposite directions. On one side runs the line of Cain, the murderer, and a few generations down it produces a man named Lamech, who is the first man in the Bible to take 2 wives, and who stands up in front of them and sings a song. And the song is a boast about killing. "I have killed a man for wounding me," he brags, "a young man for striking me. If Cain is avenged 7 times, then Lamech 77 times. Hear what has happened to the human heart in just a few generations." Cain at least felt the weight of his murder and feared it. His descendant writes music about his. Violence has gone from a shameful secret to a thing men brag about in front of their wives, and it is escalating, 7 becoming 77. That is the line of Cain. But there is another line, the line of Seth, the son God appointed in Abel's place, and something very different is growing there. Most of that genealogy is a drumbeat of death. The text lists man after man, and after almost every one it repeats the same 3 words, and he died, and he died, and he died. All the way down the page, like a bell tolling, the sentence from the garden being paid out generation after generation, until it reaches one man, and the bell does not toll. His name is Enoch, and of Enoch the text says something it says about no one else in that whole list. Enoch walked with God, and then 3 words that stop you cold. He was not, for God took him. He does not die. He walks so closely with God for so long that one day he simply steps out of the world and is gone, taken, in the middle of a chapter that is nothing but death, death, death. One man is quietly lifted out of it, and it is the smallest, brightest hint, buried in the pre-flood dark, that death might not get the last word after all. Hold on to that, because it is going to matter enormously at the very end of this book, when another man, in a coffin, refuses to believe that the grave is where his story stops. And there is a strange, dark passage tucked in right here that scholars have argued about for thousands of years, and this channel would rather show it to you than smooth it over. The text says that in those days the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and took them as wives, and that there were Nephilim on the earth in those days, giants, mighty men of renown, the heroes of old. It is a genuinely mysterious few verses. Some read the sons of God as a fallen spiritual rebellion crossing a line it was never meant to cross. Others read it as the godly line of Seth intermarrying with the corrupt line of Cain until the whole distinction dissolved. What the text is clearly telling you, whichever reading you take, is that even the boundaries between heaven and earth are being violated now. The disorder is total, and that word disorder matters because it is about to undo the entire work of the first chapter. Because look at what God feels, and it is not what you would expect. It does not say God was angry, though he had every right to be. It says the Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. Some translations say his heart was filled with pain. The Maker who stood over creation and called it good again and again now looks at what his image-bearers have done to it and to each other, and he grieves. The flood, when it comes, is not a tantrum. It is a broken heart, and God says he will wipe from the face of the earth the human race he has created and the animals with them, for he is grieved that he has made them. The world is about to be uncreated. The waters that God separated on the second day, the waters he pushed back to make room for life, are about to come crashing back in. Order is going to dissolve back into the chaos it came from. But, and this is the but, that the whole human race hangs on. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. In a world where every thought of every heart was only evil, there was one man who walked with God. Noah is described as righteous, blameless among the people of his time, and so the thread that we have been following, the promised line, the bloodline that has to survive for the offspring who crushes the serpent to one day be born, narrows down terrifyingly to a single family on a single boat. If Noah goes under, the promise goes under with him. Everything hangs on whether one man will do one very strange, very public, very humiliating thing that God is about to ask of him. And what God asks is enormous. Build a boat, not a fishing boat, an ark the size of a small mountain, longer than a football field, 3 decks high, sealed inside and out with pitch, built on dry land, nowhere near the sea, for a flood that has never happened in a world that has, as far as the text lets on, never even seen rain. Imagine being Noah's neighbor. Imagine watching this man and his 3 sons spend years, by tradition, a very long time, hammering together a wooden monster in a field while he tells anyone who will listen that God is going to flood the world. He must have looked completely insane, and Noah builds it anyway. The text says it with beautiful, flat simplicity. Noah did everything just as God commanded him. No recorded argument, no negotiation. He just builds board by board, year by year, a strange act of faith in the middle of a mocking world. Then God tells him to bring the animals, pairs of every kind of creature, male and female, to keep them alive through what is coming. And this is the detail that reveals the heart underneath the judgment. The flood is not just about ending the wicked, it is about saving. It is about preserving a seed of every living thing so that the world can begin again on the other side. The ark is a rescue floating inside a catastrophe. And when everything is loaded, when the family and the animals are all inside, the text says something that will break you a little if you slow down for it. The Lord shut him in. God himself closes the door. From the outside, Noah does not seal his own salvation. The same God who is bringing the flood is the one who shuts the one door that will keep this family safe from it. And then the sky breaks open. The springs of the great deep burst open, the text says, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened. This is the uncreation. Water from below and water from above, the exact waters God had separated to make the world, rushing back together to unmake it. It rains for 40 days and 40 nights. The waters rise until they cover the hills, then the mountains, until every living thing that moves on the earth, every bird, every animal, every person outside that boat is gone. The text does not gloat over it. It reports it with a heavy, mournful stillness. Everything on dry land that had the breath of life in its nostrils died. Only Noah was left, and those with him in the ark. Picture that boat, alone, on an endless grey ocean with no shore in any direction, the entire world drowned beneath it. One family and a cargo of animals floating over the grave of everything that was. The promise is in that boat. It is the only place in the whole world it still exists. And it does not end quickly. This is the part the picture book version skips. The rain stopped, but the water did not. The text says the floodwaters covered the earth for 150 days and then began to go down only slowly, inch by inch, over months. Noah and his family are not on that boat for a rainy weekend. By the time it is over, they have been sealed inside a wooden box, in the dark, with every animal on earth, on an endless sea for more than a year. Picture the patience of that, the waiting, no land in sight, no word from God, just the sound of water against the hull day after day after day, trusting that the God who shut the door has not forgotten the people behind it. And just when the waiting has gone on so long that it feels like the whole world has been forgotten, one quiet sentence turns everything around. And then comes the turn of the whole chapter. God remembered Noah. Not that God had forgotten. In the Bible, when God remembers someone, it means he acts, he moves toward them, he keeps his promise. God remembered Noah and all the animals with him, and he sent a wind over the earth, and the waters began to recede. Notice that. A wind over the waters. The exact image from the very first verses of Genesis, the wind of God sweeping over the deep right before creation began. God is doing it again. He is making a world a second time out of water with a wind starting over. And Noah, wanting to know if the world has come back, sends out a raven and then a dove. The first time the dove finds no place to land and returns. The second time it comes back with a fresh olive leaf in its beak, and Noah knows the water is going down, that somewhere out there, life is growing again. And the third time, he sends the dove, and it does not come back at all, because it has found a home. The world is habitable again. The boat comes to rest on the mountains, and the family steps out onto a scoured, empty, brand new earth. And the first thing Noah does is build an altar and worship. And God makes a promise. And it is the first of the great covenants that will now shape the entire rest of the book. Never again, God says, will I curse the ground because of humans, even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood. Never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. And he hangs a sign in the sky to seal it, a rainbow. He says, I have set my bow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Here is the detail almost everyone misses. A bow is a weapon, and God hangs his war bow in the sky pointed up, away from the earth, hung up, set down. It is a picture of a warrior laying down his weapon. Whenever the storm clouds gather again, and they will, that bow in the sky is a promise. The waters will not win. I will not let the world go under again. But do not mistake this for a happy ending, because Genesis is far too honest for that. The very next thing that happens to this new, righteous, rescued humanity is that Noah plants a vineyard, gets drunk, and passes out naked in his tent, and a shameful family incident follows that ends with a curse on one of his grandsons. The flood washed away the whole corrupt world, but it did not wash away the corruption in the human heart. The problem was never just out there in other people. It was in here, in all of them, in the same heart that God said was evil from childhood. You cannot fix the human race by drowning it and starting over with the best family available, because the best family available still carries the crack from the garden. The flood proves that the promise cannot come through a better flood. It has to come through that offspring, that one descendant, the one God swore would crush the serpent's head. And so the search narrows again, from a whole world to one family, and now, from that family, God is about to reach down and pick out one single man. But first, humanity is going to make one more spectacular attempt to become gods on its own terms, and this time, they are going to try to build their way into heaven. Humanity multiplies again and spreads, and comes to a plain in a land called Shinar, and they settle there, and they get an idea, a big one. Come, they say to one another, let us build ourselves a city, with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. And here is the thing to catch. It sounds impressive. It sounds like progress. But listen to the motive underneath it. So that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the earth. Two problems, both of them the garden all over again. First, they want to make a name for themselves, to build their own glory up to the sky, to be like God under their own power, the serpent's promise in the shape of architecture. And second, God had told humanity to fill the earth, to spread out, and they are doing the exact opposite, huddling together, refusing to scatter, building one giant monument to their own unity and greatness instead. And God comes down. There is a quiet joke in the way the text says it. These people are building a tower they are sure will reach the heavens, and God has to come down just to see it, because their mighty tower is so small from where he sits that he has to descend to find it. And he sees exactly what is happening. that a unified humanity with one language, bent on making its own name, will stop at nothing, and that this road ends somewhere very dark. So he does not destroy the tower. He does something stranger and more merciful. He confuses their language. Suddenly the workers cannot understand each other. The commands turn to noise, the plans fall apart. The project collapses in a chaos of voices that no longer connect, and the people who refuse to scatter are scattered across the whole face of the earth, exactly as they feared, exactly as they were always meant to spread. The place is called Babel, which sounds like the word for confusion, and this is the last picture of the whole human race acting together in Genesis, divided, scattered, speaking past each other. A species that tried to climb to heaven on its own and ended up more fractured than ever. So here is where the whole book pivots, and it pivots on a single, quiet, world-changing decision. Humanity as a whole has failed. The garden failed, Cain failed, the flood generation failed, Babel failed. Trying to fix everyone all at once has not worked, so God changes strategy entirely. Instead of dealing with the whole scattered mass of humanity at once, he is going to reach down into that scattered crowd and pick out one man, one family, one thread, and he is going to make that one man a promise so large that it is meant eventually to reach every last person who was just scattered from Babel. The camera of the story, which has been sweeping over the whole earth, over oceans and towers and the entire human race, suddenly narrows all the way down to a single tent in a single city and a single aging man who does not yet know that the entire future of the world is about to be laid on his shoulders. His name is Abram. Abram lives in a city called Ur, a real, sophisticated, prosperous city, and his family later settles in a place called Haran. He is not a young hero. He is an old man, 75 years old when his story really begins, married to a woman named Sarai, and the text drops one devastating detail about them before anything else happens. Sarai was barren. She had no child. Hold on to that, because it is the engine of everything that follows. The man God is about to build a nation out of has no children and a wife who cannot have them, and they are both already old. And into that dead end God speaks. He tells Abram, "Go, leave your country, your people, your father's household, and go to a land I will show you, not a land I will name, a land I will show you." He has to leave everything he knows and everything that makes him safe and start walking toward a destination God will not even tell him, on nothing but a voice and a promise. And then comes the promise itself, and it is the second great pillar of the whole Bible after the offspring in the garden. So listen to the whole shape of it. "I will make you into a great nation," God says, "and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse." And then the line that reaches all the way to the edges of the earth. "And all peoples on the earth will be blessed through you." Do you see what just happened? At Babel, humanity tried to make a name for itself and got scattered. Now God says to one man, "I will make your name great, and through you I will bless the very peoples who were scattered." The promise to Abram is God's answer to Babel. The blessing that humanity could not seize for itself by building upward, God is going to give freely, downward, through one chosen family, to everyone. The thread from the garden now has a name attached to it. The offspring who will crush the serpent is going to come through this old, childless man, which is, on the face of it, completely impossible. And that impossibility is the whole point. And Abram does the thing that makes him the father of everyone who has ever trusted God against the evidence. He goes, 75 years old, no children, no map, no proof, and he packs up his whole household, his wife, his nephew Lot, everything he owns, and he walks out of the only life he has ever known toward a land he has never seen, because a voice told him to. He arrives in the land of Canaan, and God appears to him again and says, "To your offspring I will give this land." And Abram builds an altar there, in a land that is not yet his, promised to children he does not yet have, and he keeps moving through it as a stranger, a nomad in the country that has just been promised to his descendants. His whole life from here on is going to be this exact tension, a promise of countless offspring held by a man with none, a promise of a land held by a man who owns not 1 square foot of it. Faith stretched out over a gap between the word and the reality for years and then decades. And almost immediately, the gap gets tested. A famine hits the land, the very land God just promised, and Abram, afraid, goes down to Egypt to survive. And there he panics and lies, telling everyone that his beautiful wife Sarai is only his sister, to save his own skin, nearly losing her to Pharaoh's household in the process. It is the first sign of something this book will never let you forget. The people who carry the promise are deeply, sometimes shockingly flawed. Abram, the father of faith, is also, right here, a frightened man who lies and puts his wife in danger to protect himself, and God has to step in and rescue the situation Abram's fear created. But the promise survives even Abram's failure. He comes back up out of Egypt, wealthier than before, and the story continues. But now there is a new problem, and it is a very human one. Abram and his nephew Lot have both become rich, with huge flocks, and the land cannot support both of them together. Their herdsmen start fighting, and the family that is supposed to carry the promise is about to split. And how Abram handles that split tells you the man is starting to change. He has the right, as the elder, to take the best land for himself. Instead, he lets Lot choose first, and Lot looks out over the whole country and picks the lush, green, well-watered plain to the east, the valley of the Jordan, which the text says was like the garden of the Lord, like Eden itself. He pitches his tents toward a pair of cities down on that plain, cities already famous for how wicked they were. Their names were Sodom and Gomorrah, and with that one greedy choice, to grab the land that looked like paradise and move toward the cities that were anything but, Lot walks himself and his family straight into the path of one of the most terrifying judgments in the entire book. But before we follow him down onto that plain, God takes Abram out under the night sky and makes him a promise so vivid and seals it with a ceremony so strange and so bloody that it will bind God himself to this one family forever. So God takes Abram outside into the dark and says 4 words that will echo for the rest of history. Look up at the sky, count the stars, if you can count them, and then, so shall your offspring be. Sit in that scene for a second. An old man, childless, whose entire hope of a son is a promise with nothing yet to show for it, standing under a sky so thick with stars that they cannot be numbered, and being told, that is your family, that many. And the text says something about Abram in that moment that the rest of the Bible never lets go of. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. He had no child, he had no proof. All he had was a voice and a sky full of light, and he chose to trust it. That single act of trust, an old man believing an impossible promise in the dark, is held up ever after as the very model of what it means to be right with God. Not achievement, not perfection, trust. But Abram is human, and he wants more than a promise. He asks God, "How can I know?" And what God does next is strange and haunting and easy to misread. He tells Abram to bring animals and to cut them in half and to lay the pieces in 2 rows with a path down the middle. This was an ancient way of sealing a covenant, a blood oath. 2 parties would walk together between the split carcasses, and the meaning was chilling and clear. May I be torn apart like these animals if I break my word. Abram lays out the pieces and waits, driving off the vultures, as the sun goes down and a deep and terrible darkness falls over him. And then, in the dark, God comes. But not as a man walking beside Abram. He comes as a smoking firepot and a blazing torch, and he passes between the pieces alone. Abram never walks the path, only God does. Read what that means. In a normal covenant, both parties walk the bloody road, both stake their lives on keeping the deal. Here, God takes the oath by himself, onto himself. He is saying, "This promise does not depend on you keeping your end, Abram. If it fails, let it fall on me. The whole future of the world is now bound to God's own life." And that covenant was not made with a soft man. Around these same years, Abram showed what the promise was turning him into in a story that almost never gets told. War broke out. A coalition of 4 eastern kings swept through the region and crushed a rebellion of 5 local kings, and when they sacked the cities of the plain, Sodom among them, they carried off everything, including Abram's nephew Lot, who was living there, dragged away with the plunder. And when the news reached Abram, this old shepherd did something nobody would expect. He armed the trained men of his own household, 318 of them, and chased a victorious army halfway across the land. He struck them at night, routed them, and brought back every captive and all the plunder, and rescued Lot. The man who lets everyone else choose first, who steps away from conflict, turns out to be a lion when his family is taken. And on the road home from that battle, a figure the rest of the Bible never stops puzzling over walks up to meet him. A man named Melchizedek, king of a city called Salem, which later becomes Jerusalem, and he is called a priest of God Most High. Genesis gives him no father, no genealogy, no birth, and no death. He simply appears out of nowhere and into nowhere, and the rest of the Bible will make a great deal of that silence. And he brings out bread and wine, and he blesses Abram, saying, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, maker of heaven and earth." And Abram, the father of the faithful, bows to this mysterious priest-king and gives him 1/10 of everything he has just won. Hold that image, a priest and a king of Salem, bringing out bread and wine and blessing the man who carries the promise, because this shadowy figure is going to echo forward through the entire rest of the Bible, a king who is somehow also a priest, pointing at someone who has not come yet. And then the king of Sodom, whose people Abram just rescued, offers him a reward. "Keep all the goods, just give me back my people." And Abram will not touch a thing. "I have raised my hand to God Most High," he says, "and sworn that I will not accept even a thread or the strap of a sandal, so that you can never say, 'I made Abram rich.' He will take his wealth from God alone, or not at all." That is the man the covenant of fire was cut with. Not a passive old dreamer, a warrior who rescues his family and then refuses to be bought. But even after a night like that, the waiting grinds on, and this is where the carriers of the promise stumble badly. Years pass, and still no child. And Sarai, worn down by hope deferred, does what people do when a promise takes too long. She tries to help God keep it. She gives Abram her Egyptian servant, a woman named Hagar, and tells him to have a child through her instead. It was a legal custom of the time, a workaround, a way to manufacture an heir. And Abram, who trusted the stars, now goes along with the shortcut. Hagar conceives. And immediately, the household turns toxic, jealousy between the two women, Hagar looking down on her mistress, Sarai lashing out, Hagar fleeing into the desert pregnant and alone. It is a mess, entirely of their own making, the fruit of trying to force the promise instead of trusting it. And out in that desert, God meets the runaway slave woman, sees her, promises that her son will become a great people too, and she gives God a name that no one else in the Bible gives him. "You are the God who sees me." Her son is born, and he is named Ishmael, but he is not the child of the promise. The shortcut produced a son, but not the son. And now Abram has to keep waiting, with a house full of the wreckage his impatience caused. 13 more years of silence go by, and then, when Abram is 99 years old, God appears again, and he reaffirms everything, and he seals it with new names. Abram, which means exalted father, becomes Abraham, father of a multitude. Sarai becomes Sarah, princess. And God gives them the sign of the covenant, circumcision, a permanent mark cut into the flesh of every male in the household, a physical reminder in their own bodies that they belong to this promise. And then God says the thing that makes Abraham fall on his face and laugh. Sarah, your 90-year-old wife, is going to have a son. Abraham laughs at the sheer impossibility of it. And soon after, 3 mysterious visitors arrive at his tent in the heat of the day, and he rushes to host them, and one of them repeats it. This time next year, Sarah will have a son. And Sarah, listening from inside the tent, laughs too, a bitter, tired, private laugh, because she is far too old, and she knows it. And the visitor hears the laugh she thought was silent, and asks the question that hangs over this entire book. Is anything too hard for the Lord? Remember that laugh. Because the child, when he comes, is going to be named for it. But those same visitors did not come only to promise a child. They came on their way to something terrible, and Abraham finds out where they are going next, down onto that green plain where his nephew Lot chose to live, to the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, whose wickedness has become so great that a cry has gone up from them to heaven. And what Abraham does next is astonishing. He stands in front of God and he argues. He bargains for those wicked cities for his nephew's sake and for the sake of any decent person in them. Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked, he asks. What if there are 50 good people there, and God says he will spare the whole city for 50, and Abraham, growing bolder and humbler at the same time, keeps going. What about 45, 40, 30, 20, what about 10? And each time God agrees. For the sake of 10 righteous people, he will spare the entire city. This is one of the great pictures of God in the whole Bible, not eager to destroy, willing to spare a whole rotten city for the sake of a tiny handful of the good. But the terrible thing about Sodom is what it reveals when the angels arrive. There are not even 10. The 2 angels go down into Sodom in the evening, and Lot takes them into his home to protect them. And that night, the men of the city, the text says all of them, young and old, from every part of town, surround the house and demand that Lot hand the visitors over so they can violate them. It is a scene of total, collective cruelty. A whole city united in wanting to brutalize 2 strangers who came to their gates. This is what the outcry was about. Not a private failing, but a public, unanimous savagery, a place where the sacred duty of protecting a guest had been inverted into a mob wanting to destroy one. The angels strike the crowd blind, pull Lot back inside, and tell him the truth. This place is finished. Get your family out tonight. But even now, mercy is dragging its feet trying to save people who barely want saving. Lot warns his sons-in-law and they laugh at him. Lot himself hesitates, lingers, cannot make himself move, and the angels finally grab him and his wife and his 2 daughters by the hand and physically pull them out of the city because the Lord was merciful to them and set them outside the walls and say, "Run and do not look back." And then the sky rains fire. Burning sulfur falls on Sodom and Gomorrah, and the cities and the whole plain and everything growing on it are destroyed. The green paradise that Lot chose turned in a morning into a smoking waste. And Lot's wife, running for her life with the fire at her back, does the one thing she was told not to do. She looks back. Whether it was longing for the home she was losing, or grief, or a refusal to let go of the life the fire was taking, the text does not say. It says only that she looked back, and she became a pillar of salt, frozen forever between the burning city and the safety ahead, unable to leave the past behind, even as it killed her. And far away, up on his ridge, Abraham gets up early in the morning and looks out over the plain and sees dense smoke rising from the land like smoke from a furnace. His bargaining had a limit. There were not 10. But notice what the text says even in the middle of the catastrophe. When God destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Abraham and he brought Lot out. Lot is not saved because Lot is good. Lot is saved because God remembered Abraham. The promise reaches out and pulls one more family out of the fire. So the promise survives Sodom, and it survives Abraham's impatience, and it survives all those years of silence. And finally, exactly as the visitor said, it happens. In their extreme old age, Sarah becomes pregnant, and she gives birth to a son, the impossible child, and they name him Isaac, which means he laughs, in memory of every time they laughed at the very idea of him. And Sarah says, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. After 25 years of waiting, the star promise has one small, giggling flesh and blood beginning. The whole future is now wrapped up in one little boy, which is exactly what makes the very next thing God asks Abraham to do the single most horrifying request in all of Scripture, because God is about to ask Abraham to take that boy, that one boy, the promise made flesh, up a mountain and give him back. But before that mountain, there is another child and another wilderness, and it is worth stopping for, because of what it tells you about the God of this story. Sometime after Isaac is born, the old tension in the house finally boils over. Sarah sees Hagar's son, Ishmael, mocking her little boy, and she cannot bear it, and she demands that Abraham send the slave woman and her son away for good. And Abraham is torn in half, because Ishmael is his son too, his firstborn, and he loves him. But God tells him to listen, and gives him a promise to hold on to, that Ishmael will not be abandoned, that he too will become a great nation, because he is Abraham's child. So early in the morning, Abraham sends Hagar and the boy out into the desert with bread and a skin of water, and it is one of the hardest things he ever does. And out there, the water runs out, and Hagar does the thing no parent should ever have to do. She puts her son down under a bush and walks a little way off because she cannot bear to watch him die, and she lifts up her voice and weeps. But God hears the boy. And that is the whole point, because the boy's name, Ishmael, means God hears. An angel calls to Hagar out of heaven and tells her not to be afraid. And then God opens her eyes, and she sees something that was there the whole time. A well, water, life, right in front of her, that her grief had blinded her to. And the boy lives, and grows up in the wilderness, and becomes a nation, exactly as God said. So hold this next to what comes now, because the two scenes are meant to rhyme. Even the son who is not the son of the promise, even the child sent away into the desert, is seen and heard and rescued at the last moment. And that is the same God who is now about to ask Abraham for the other son, the one he kept. Sometime later, the text says, God tested Abraham, and the test is almost too much to read. Take your son, God says, your only son, Isaac, whom you love. Go to the region of Moriah and sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. Every word of that sentence is a knife. Your son, your only son, the one you waited 100 years for, the one the whole promise depends on, whom you love. God names exactly what he is asking Abraham to give up, slowly, so there is no mistaking it. And here is the impossible weight of it. This is not just Abraham's child. This is the future. God promised that through Isaac, through this specific boy, the whole world would be blessed. And now God himself is telling Abraham to kill him. The command seems to cancel the promise. It makes no sense at all. And the most staggering part is Abraham's response, which is no words of protest, only obedience. Early the next morning, he gets up, saddles his donkey, cuts the wood for the fire, and starts walking toward the mountain with his boy. Whatever is happening inside him, the text keeps outside, and the silence of it is unbearable. For 3 days they walk. 3 days is a long time to carry a command like that in your chest. And then Abraham sees the mountain in the distance, and he says something to his servants that is either the deepest faith in the Bible or a father who cannot bear to say the truth out loud. And maybe it is both. Stay here, he tells them. The boy and I will go over there and worship, and then we will come back to you. We, both of us, we will come back. And they climb, the two of them alone, and the boy is carrying the wood for his own sacrifice on his back, and his father is carrying the fire and the knife. And Isaac, who is no fool, asks the question that must have shattered his father. My father, he says, the fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for the offering? And Abraham gives an answer that is either evasion or prophecy. God himself will provide the lamb, my son. And the two of them walked on together. That line, the two of them walked on together, is repeated, and it lands like a weight, a father and the son he believes he is about to lose, climbing the last of the mountains side by side. They reach the place. Abraham builds an altar. He arranges the wood, and then he binds his son and lays him on top of the wood on the altar. Picture the two of them in that moment, the old man and the boy, and whatever passed between their eyes. And Abraham reaches out his hand and takes the knife to kill his son. The blade is up. The story has gone as far into darkness as any story can go. And in that exact fraction of a second, a voice tears out of heaven, "Abraham, Abraham, do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Stop the film right there. The knife freezes in the air. The boy is alive. And Abraham looks up, and there, caught by its horns in a thicket, is a ram, a substitute, provided at the last possible instant by God himself, exactly as Abraham told his son it would be. Abraham takes the ram and offers it in place of Isaac. The son walks back down the mountain alive, and a lamb dies in his place. And Abraham names that place with a phrase that becomes a permanent truth: "The Lord will provide. On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." Now this is one of those passages this channel refuses to flatten because it is genuinely hard and people have wrestled with it for thousands of years. What kind of God asks this? And the answer the text itself gives is careful. God never wanted Isaac dead. He stops it. He provides the substitute. The pagan world around Abraham really did sacrifice their children to their gods, and here the true God takes his servant right up to the edge of that horror and then says, "No, never this. I will provide the offering myself." The test was never about God needing a dead boy. It was about whether Abraham trusted God more than he trusted even the gift God had given him, more than the promise itself. And watch the shape of what happened on that mountain, because it is a shape you have seen before and will see again. A beloved only son carrying the wood for his own death up a hill. A father willing to give him up. A substitute dying in the son's place so the son can live. Keep that picture. Genesis is quietly rehearsing something here, on a mountain in the region that would one day be called Jerusalem, that the rest of the Bible will spend itself explaining. And then, quietly, the generation that carried the promise this far begins to pass. Sarah dies at 127 years old, and Abraham, who owned not 1 foot of the land God promised him, has to buy a field with a cave in it just to have somewhere to bury his wife. He purchases the cave of Machpelah and lays Sarah to rest in it, and that cave, that single purchased grave, is the only piece of the promised land Abraham will ever actually own. But before his own time comes, he does one last thing to protect the thread. He will not let his son marry into the corrupt people around them, so he sends his most trusted servant on a long journey back to the land of his own family to find Isaac a wife. And what happens at that journey's end is a gentle, almost tender scene, set down in the middle of all this weight like a held breath. The servant stops at a well outside the town in the evening, the hour when the women come out to draw water, and he prays a very specific prayer. "Let the young woman I ask for a drink," he says, "who then offers to water my camels as well, be the one you have chosen." And before he has even finished praying, a young woman named Rebecca comes down to the well, and when he asks her for a drink, she gives it, and then she offers, on her own, to draw water for all of his camels too. 10 thirsty camels, after a desert crossing, drinking their fill, is not a small kindness. It is hours of hard, generous labor for a total stranger. It is a whole character revealed in a single act, and the servant knows he has found her. Her family agrees to let her go, but they leave the last word to her, and they ask the question this whole book keeps asking: "Will you go?" And she gives an answer as brave as Abraham's own: "I will go." She leaves everything she has ever known to travel to a land she has never seen, to marry a man she has never met, on the same kind of faith that started the whole story. And when she arrives, Isaac is out walking in a field in the evening, and he looks up and sees the camels coming, and she sees him, and he brings her into his mother's tent and loves her and is comforted at last after Sarah's death. And when Abraham finally dies, an old man full of years, something quietly beautiful happens at the grave. His two sons bury him. Isaac, the son of the promise, and Ishmael, the son of the slave woman, the two half-brothers torn apart by all that jealousy years before, stand together one more time to lay their father in the cave beside Sarah. And then the thread is Isaac's to carry. And Isaac is the quiet one, the patriarch nobody tells stories about, and that is almost the point of him. When the wells his father dug are stopped up with earth by jealous neighbors, Isaac does not go to war over them. He simply digs them out again and reopens his father's water, and when they fight him over one, he moves on and digs another and names it room, saying, "Now the Lord has made room for us." He carries the promise not by conquering, but by continuing. And God comes to him the way he came to his father and lays the same words over him. "I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you, and I will bless you and multiply your offspring for the sake of my servant Abraham." The promise does not shrink as it passes down the generations. It just keeps moving. The promise has a new generation to run through, but Rebekah, like Sarah before her, cannot have children, and once again, the whole future hangs on a barren woman and a waiting God. Quick pause here, because you have just watched something this channel exists to show you. If you would rather see the Bible as one connected story, where a knife on a mountain rhymes with a promise in a garden, instead of a pile of disconnected Sunday school lessons, then subscribe. We take the book people think they already know, and we read it slowly enough to see the thread. And stay with me, because the promise is about to pass to the least likely, least deserving man yet. Not a faithful old believer under the stars, a grasping, scheming younger twin who will lie to his blind father, cheat his own brother, and spend 20 years running, and who God will still choose and even rename. His story is the strangest turn yet. After 20 years of marriage and no children, Isaac prays for his barren wife, and Rebekah finally conceives, and immediately she knows something is wrong, because the babies inside her are not just moving, they are fighting. She asks God why, and the answer she gets is not comforting. It is a prophecy that will haunt the whole family. 2 nations are in your womb, God tells her. 2 peoples will be separated from you. One will be stronger than the other, and here is the line that overturns everything: the older will serve the younger. In that world, the firstborn son got everything: the double inheritance, the leadership, the blessing. But before these twins have taken a breath, God says the normal order is going to be reversed. And when they are born, the first one comes out red and covered in hair, and they name him Esau, and the second comes out gripping his brother's heel, as if trying to pull him back and take his place, and they name him Jacob, which means heel grabber, or, less politely, deceiver, supplanter, the one who trips you up. The name is a prophecy of its own. This second twin is going to spend the first half of his life grabbing for what belongs to other people, and the twins grow up as opposites, and the family splits down the middle in the worst possible way. Esau becomes a rugged outdoorsman, a hunter, and his father Isaac loves him, partly, the text dryly notes, because Isaac had a taste for wild game. Jacob is quieter, a homebody, and his mother Rebekah loves him. A father with a favorite, a mother with a favorite, and 2 brothers set against each other. Watch how the favoritism poisons this family, because it is going to poison the next generation too. And one day the whole birthright, the entire firstborn inheritance, gets thrown away over a bowl of soup. Esau comes in from the field starving, and Jacob has a pot of red stew simmering, and Esau, dramatic and impulsive, says he is going to die if he does not eat. And Jacob, cold and calculating, sees his moment. "Sell me your birthright first," he says. And Esau, who cannot see past his own stomach, says, "Fine, what good is a birthright to me if I starve?" And he swears it away, for a bowl of lentils and some bread, and eats and gets up and leaves. The text passes the verdict in 4 flat words. So Esau despised his birthright. 2 brothers, and neither one is a hero here. One is willing to sell his sacred inheritance for a snack. The other is willing to buy his own brother's future when he is down. But there is still the blessing, the formal, spoken, irrevocable words a father passed to his heir, and that is where this family finally tears itself apart. Isaac is old now and blind, and he knows he is dying, and he calls Esau to hunt some game, make his favorite meal, and receive the blessing of the firstborn. And Rebekah overhears, and she springs into action to steal it for her favorite. She cooks the meal herself, dresses Jacob in Esau's clothes so he smells like his brother, and covers his smooth arms and neck with goatskins, so his blind father will feel the hair and think it is his hairy son. And Jacob walks into his dying father's tent and lies to his face. "Who are you?" Isaac asks. "I am Esau, your firstborn," Jacob says, and Isaac, suspicious, says the voice sounds like Jacob, but the hands feel like Esau, and he asks again, "Are you really my son, Esau?" And Jacob says, "Flat out, I am." He even brings God into the lie, saying the Lord helped him find the game quickly, and the blind old man, deceived, reaches out and blesses Jacob with everything, the dew of heaven, the richness of the earth, mastery over his brothers. And the moment it is done, it cannot be undone. And then Esau walks in with his meal, and the truth detonates. Isaac begins to tremble violently, realizing what has happened, and Esau lets out a cry the text calls loud and bitter. "Bless me too, my father." But the blessing is spent, and Esau, robbed of both his birthright and his blessing by the same scheming brother, says the thing that names Jacob perfectly. Is he not rightly called Jacob the deceiver? He has cheated me twice. And Esau begins to plan his revenge, promising himself that as soon as their father is dead and the mourning is over, he is going to kill his brother. And so Jacob, the grasping younger twin who has now stolen everything, has to run for his life. His mother sends him away to her brother Laban, far to the east, supposedly to find a wife, really to escape a brother who wants him dead. And here is where you have to stop and notice something staggering about this book. This liar, this cheat, this man who deceived his blind father and bought his brother's despair, is the one God has chosen to carry the promise. Not because Jacob earned it, he is the opposite of deserving. The thread of the promise is now in the hands of the most morally compromised man to hold it yet, running east into exile with nothing but the clothes on his back and the blessing he stole. And on that first terrified night of his exile, alone in the open country with a stone for a pillow, running from everything he has broken, God does something Jacob has done nothing to deserve. He meets him. Jacob dreams, and in the dream there is a stairway, a ladder, set on the earth with its top reaching into heaven, and the angels of God are going up and down on it, and above it stands the Lord himself. And God speaks to this fugitive, this cheat, and he does not scold him. He makes him the promise. "I am the God of your grandfather Abraham and your father Isaac. The land you are lying on, I will give to you and your offspring. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and all peoples will be blessed through you and them." And then the line a man on the run most needs to hear: "I am with you, and I will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back. I will not leave you until I have done what I promised." Jacob wakes up shaking and says, "Surely the Lord was in this place, and I did not know it. This is none other than the house of God, the gate of heaven." He has fled from home with a stolen blessing and a guilty conscience, and God has just met him in the middle of nowhere to tell him the promise is real, and it is his, and he is not alone. That is grace given to a man who has earned the exact opposite. But grace does not mean Jacob gets to skip the consequences, and the next 20 years are going to be a long, hard lesson in being on the receiving end of his own tricks. He arrives in the east and meets a young woman named Rachel at a well, and falls for her instantly, and he loves her so much that when her father Laban asks what wage he wants for working, Jacob offers 7 years of labor just to marry her. And then the text says, a line about love you do not quite forget. Those 7 years seem to him like only a few days because of his love for her. But Laban is a schemer too, cut from the same cloth as his nephew, and on the wedding night, in the dark, behind the veil, he swaps his older daughter Leah for Rachel, and Jacob wakes up in the morning married to the wrong sister. The deceiver has been deceived. The man who put on a disguise to trick his blind father in the dark has now been tricked in the dark by a disguise. And when he confronts Laban, Laban gives an answer dripping with irony that Jacob cannot miss. It is not our custom, he says, to give the younger before the older. The younger before the older. The exact thing Jacob did to Esau is now being quoted back to him as the reason he has been cheated. He has to work another 7 years for Rachel too. And out of that broken, rivalrous, tangled household, with 2 sister wives competing for one husband and each giving him their servants as well, comes something the whole story has been building toward. Children, many of them. Leah, unloved but fertile, has son after son. Rachel, loved but for years barren, aches and competes, and finally, with God's help, has children of her own. Through these 4 women, Leah, Rachel, and their 2 servants, Jacob becomes the father of 12 sons and a daughter. And if you slow down over how those children get their names, you find one of the saddest and most human stretches in all of Genesis, because the names are a diary of 2 women's pain. Leah, the wife Jacob never chose, keeps having sons and naming them after her longing to finally be loved. Her firstborn she calls Reuben, saying, "The Lord has seen my misery. Surely now my husband will love me." He does not. She has another and names him Simeon, because the Lord heard that I am not loved. Still, nothing changes. A third, Levi, saying, "Now at last my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. You can feel her heart breaking across those names. A woman bearing child after child, trying to buy her way into a love that will not come. And then something shifts in her. She has a 4th son, and this time she does not name him for Jacob at all. She names him Judah, which means praise, saying simply, "This time I will praise the Lord." She stops reaching for her husband and turns to God instead, and hold on to that name, Judah, because out of all 12 of these sons, born out of all this ache, it is Judah's line that the kings of Israel will come from, and one day the promised one himself. The tribe that carries the royal thread is born from the unloved wife, in the very moment she stops grasping and starts praising. And on the other side of the tent, Rachel, the wife Jacob adores, is living the opposite agony. She has his whole heart and no children, and she watches her sister collect sons, and it drives her to despair. She says to Jacob something so raw it stops you cold, "Give me children, or I will die." And Jacob, for once, snaps back at her, "Am I in the place of God, who has kept you from having children?" The rivalry turns bitter, both women handing their servants to Jacob to bear sons on their behalf, keeping score son by son, until between the 4 of them the children keep coming. And then, at last, the text says, God remembered Rachel, and she conceives, and she has a son of her very own, and she names him Joseph. 4 women, 1 man, years of longing and jealousy and heartbreak, and out of all of it, 12 sons and the beginnings of a nation. And those 12 sons are not just a big family. Say their names slowly, because you already know where this is going. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and eventually Benjamin. 12 sons, 12 tribes. This squabbling, polygamous, dysfunctional family, born out of favoritism and rivalry and deception, is the nation. This is the great nation God promised Abraham under the stars, taking shape as actual, flawed, fighting human beings. The promise is not growing in a palace. It is growing in a messy tent full of jealous wives and rival brothers. And the favoritism that has already wrecked 2 generations is loaded and waiting for a third, because Jacob loves Rachel most, which means when she finally gives him a son, he is going to love that son most of all. His name is Joseph. Eventually, Jacob has had enough of Laban's cheating, and God tells him it is time to go home. So he gathers his enormous family and his flocks, which he has grown through some clever breeding of his own, of course he has, and he slips away west, back toward the land of the promise, back toward home, which means back toward Esau, the brother he cheated, the brother who swore to kill him. 20 years have passed, but Jacob has no idea whether 20 years cooled Esau's rage or aged it into something worse. And as he approaches the border of the land, word comes back from the messengers he sent ahead, and it stops his heart. Esau is coming to meet him, and he is bringing 400 men. Jacob, the man who has run and schemed and grasped his whole life, is about to run out of road. There is a brother in front of him with an army, and a father-in-law behind him he just fled, and a river in the way. And that night, alone at that river in the dark, Jacob is going to have the strangest encounter in the entire book of Genesis. He is going to wrestle with God until the sun comes up. Jacob does everything he can to survive the meeting. He splits his camp in two so that if Esau attacks one half, the other might escape. He sends wave after wave of gifts ahead, hundreds of animals, to soften his brother's heart before they ever come face to face. And then he prays, and it is the prayer of a man who has finally run out of tricks. "I am not worthy of all the kindness you have shown me," he says to God. "Save me from my brother. You promised to be with me." It is the first time we hear Jacob admit he is not worthy of anything. And then, in the middle of the night, he sends his family and everything he owns across the river, and he stays behind, alone on the near bank. And a man comes out of the dark and grabs him, and they wrestle all night. Two figures locked together on a riverbank in the blackness, straining, neither one letting go, until the first grey light of dawn. And as day is about to break, the mysterious wrestler does something that shows this was never an even match. He simply touches Jacob's hip and wrenches it out of its socket with a single touch. This was no ordinary man. He could have ended it at any moment, and yet Jacob, injured now, in agony, still will not let go. He clings to the wrestler with everything he has left, and the wrestler says, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." And Jacob gasps out the words that change him forever. "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Think about that word. Bless. The last time Jacob wanted a blessing, he stole it in disguise by lying to his blind father in the dark. Now, 20 years later, in the dark again, he is asking for a blessing the honest way, holding on, refusing to let go, willing to be wounded for it. And the wrestler asks him a question that is really the whole point. "What is your name?" And this matters enormously because the last time Jacob was asked who he was, standing in front of his blind father, he lied. He said, "I am Esau." This time, clinging and broken, he tells the truth. Jacob, deceiver, heel grabber. That is my name. That is who I have been. And the wrestler gives him a new name. "Your name will no longer be Jacob," he says. "It will be Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans, and you have overcome." Israel. It means one who struggles with God, or God struggles. The deceiver, the cheat, the grasping man on the run is given a new identity built out of the very fight he just had. And Jacob, understanding at last who he has been wrestling, names the place Peniel, the face of God, and says, "I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." And then the sun rises over him as he leaves that place, and he is limping. He has a new name and a permanent wound, and he will walk with that limp for the rest of his life. That is what the encounter cost, and what it gave. The man who spent his whole life grabbing and winning by his own cleverness finally wins something real, a blessing, a new name, an actual meeting with God. And he wins it by losing, by being broken, by holding on and refusing to let go even when he could not win. The nation itself is now named after this, not after a hero who conquered, after a man who wrestled God and came away blessed and limping. And then, changed, limping and unarmed against an army, Jacob goes to meet his brother. He sees Esau coming with his 400 men, and he arranges his family and walks out ahead of all of them and bows to the ground 7 times as he approaches the brother he wronged. And Esau, who had every reason and every means to kill him, does something nobody watching could have predicted. He runs to Jacob, he throws his arms around his neck and he kisses him, and the 2 brothers weep. 20 years of hatred, a stolen birthright, a stolen blessing, a murder plotted, all of it dissolving in an embrace by the road. Esau does not want revenge. He does not even want the gifts at first. "My brother," he says, "I already have plenty." 2 broken men forgiving each other. It is a reconciliation that lands like a blow, and it comes right after the wrestling for a reason. Jacob even says it out loud. "To see your face," he tells Esau, "is like seeing the face of God, because you have received me." He met God at the river, and now he meets grace in the brother he was terrified of. The man who spent his life making enemies is learning late what it is to be forgiven. But this family's story is never simple for long, and grief follows Jacob home. His beloved Rachel, the wife he worked 14 years for, dies giving birth to his 12th son, and with her last breath, she names the boy son of my sorrow, but Jacob renames him Benjamin, son of my right hand. Rachel is buried on the road near Bethlehem, and Jacob's heart breaks. And now, with Rachel gone, all of Jacob's fierce love pours down onto the one person who reminds him of her most, her first son, the favorite's favorite, Joseph. And Jacob does the thing that his own father and grandfather's favoritism should have warned him never to do. He makes his love obvious, and he makes it visible, and he drapes it over the boy's shoulders in the form of a coat. A special, beautiful, unmistakable coat, given to one son in front of all the others. To Joseph, it is a sign of his father's love. To his 10 older brothers watching, it is a daily insult, proof that they will always come second. And into that jealous, wounded, dangerous family, 17-year-old Joseph is about to have a dream. And then he is going to make the mistake of telling everyone about it. Joseph is 17, the favored son in the beautiful coat, and he has a dream, and instead of keeping it to himself, he gathers his 10 older brothers, who already resent him, and tells them all about it. "We were binding sheaves of grain in the field," he says, "and my sheaf stood up, and all of your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to mine." You can imagine how that goes over. His brothers, who already hate the coat, now hate the boy wearing it even more. "Do you intend to reign over us?" they snap. And then Joseph, who apparently learned nothing, has a second dream and tells them that one too, and this one is even bigger. "The sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." This time, even his father rebukes him. "Are your mother and I and your brothers really going to bow to you?" But the text drops a quiet line that tells you to pay attention. While his brothers seethed with jealousy, his father kept the matter in mind. Because here is the thing about those dreams. They are annoying and arrogant, and the boy tells them terribly. But they are also true. Everything in this dream is going to happen. The problem is the road between the dream and its fulfillment is going to run through a pit, a slave caravan, a false accusation, and a prison cell. One day, Joseph's brothers are out grazing the flocks far from home, and Jacob sends Joseph to check on them. And as he approaches, in that ridiculous coat, visible from a long way off, the brothers see him coming, and years of resentment boil over into something murderous. "Here comes the dreamer," they say. "Let us kill him and throw him in a pit, and say a wild animal devoured him. Then we will see what becomes of his dreams." The oldest, Reuben, does not want blood on their hands and talks them into just throwing Joseph into a dry pit instead, planning secretly to rescue him later. So they strip off the hated coat, and they throw their own brother into an empty cistern, and then, the detail that tells you everything about this family, they sit down to eat a meal while he cries out from the hole. And while they are eating, a caravan of traders comes by on the way to Egypt, and Judah has an idea. "Why kill him," he says, "when we can sell him and make a profit? He is our brother, our own flesh." And so they sell Joseph, 17 years old, to slave traders for 20 pieces of silver. and watch the caravan carry him off toward Egypt in chains. The dreamer, sold by his own brothers for silver. And then they have to explain the missing boy to their father. So they take the famous coat and they slaughter a goat, and they dip the coat in its blood, and they bring it to Jacob and let him draw his own conclusion. And Jacob, the old deceiver, is now himself deceived by his own sons, using a goat and a piece of clothing, exactly the tools he once used to trick his own blind father. The man who put on Esau's clothes and goat skins to steal a blessing is now shown Joseph's bloody clothes and a dead goat, and he falls for it completely. He recognizes the coat and cries out that a wild animal has devoured his son, and he tears his clothes and mourns for Joseph and refuses to be comforted, saying he will go down to his grave grieving. The deception has come all the way around the family circle, and Joseph, meanwhile, is not dead at all. He is alive in Egypt, sold into the house of an official named Potiphar, beginning at the very bottom of a foreign world, a slave with a dream nobody believes, least of all him. But before we follow Joseph down into Egypt, the Bible does something strange. It stops. It turns away from Joseph completely, right in the middle of his story, and it hands a whole chapter to Judah, the same Judah who just said, "Let us sell our brother and make a profit." And what it shows you is a man quietly coming apart and a woman who saves the royal thread when he will not. Judah leaves his brothers, marries a Canaanite woman, and has 3 sons. His oldest son marries a woman named Tamar and then dies young, and by the custom of that world, the next brother was meant to marry the widow and raise up a son in his dead brother's name, to keep that branch of the family from dying out. But the second son refuses to do right by her, and he dies too. And now Judah is afraid of this woman, half blaming her for burying 2 of his sons, and so he sends Tamar back to her father's house with a promise he never means to keep, that one day his youngest son will marry her, and he leaves her there, stranded, a childless widow with no future and no place, quietly written out of the family. And here is what is actually at stake in that cruelty, though nobody in the scene can see it. The line of Judah, the line that every king of Israel will one day run through, is being strangled in its cradle by one man's fear. And Tamar refuses to let the line die. When she finally understands that Judah will never keep his word, she does something desperate and scandalous and brave all at once. She takes off her widow's clothes, covers her face like a stranger, and sits by the road where she knows Judah will pass. And Judah, not recognizing her, sleeps with her and leaves his personal seal and his staff behind as a pledge of payment. Months later, word reaches Judah that his widowed daughter-in-law is pregnant, and he is outraged, and he demands that she be dragged out and burned for it, the very man who wronged her, calling for her death without a flicker of self-awareness. And Tamar sends him back his own seal and his own staff with one quiet message: "The man who owns these is the father of my child." And Judah stands there, holding the proof of his own hypocrisy in his own hands, and something finally breaks open in him, and he says the truest thing he has said in his whole life: "She is more righteous than I." That is the first crack of real light in Judah. The man who sold one brother and abandoned one widow is, for the first time, looking straight at himself. And out of that broken, unlikely night, Tamar gives birth to twin sons, and the line survives, carried through a woman Judah betrayed, who fought for a future he had thrown away. Remember this, because generations later the greatest king Israel ever has, and the promised one after him, both come down through the son that Tamar saved. The royal thread very nearly died in Judah's cowardice. A wronged widow is the reason it did not. But here is the sentence the whole rest of the story turns on, and it appears now at the lowest point, when Joseph is a slave in a stranger's house in a foreign land. The Lord was with Joseph. That is it. That is the thread, still holding, even here. Joseph is a slave, but God is with him, and everything he touches prospers, and Potiphar notices and puts him in charge of his entire household. Stop and notice how strange that is. Joseph has every reason in the world to be bitter. His own brothers threw him in a hole and sold him off. He has lost his father, his home, his freedom, and even his name, and woken up a slave in a country that is not his own. He could have collapsed into rage or self-pity, and nobody would have blamed him for it. Instead, he works. He serves. He becomes so trustworthy and so obviously blessed that a high-ranking Egyptian official hands his entire estate over to a foreign teenager and stops worrying about anything except what is for dinner. The pit did not make Joseph bitter. Somehow, it made him faithful. And that quiet strength is the real miracle running under this whole part of the story. A man sinned against about as badly as a man can be, who simply refuses to let it turn him cruel. And then it falls apart again, through no fault of Joseph's own. Potiphar's wife tries again and again to seduce him, and Joseph refuses every time, saying he will not sin against God or betray his master's trust. And one day she grabs his cloak, and he runs, leaving the cloak in her hand, and she uses it, another piece of clothing used to tell a lie, to accuse him of attacking her. And Joseph, who did the right thing, gets thrown into prison for it, betrayed by his brothers, and now framed by his master's wife, punished for his integrity. If you are keeping track of the dream, the sheaves bowing, the stars bowing, it has never looked more impossible. The favored son is now a foreign slave in a dungeon, forgotten. And yet, even in the prison, the same sentence returns. The Lord was with Joseph and gave him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. God does not keep Joseph out of the pit, or out of Egypt, or out of the prison, but he is with him in every one of them. In that prison, Joseph meets two of Pharaoh's officials, a cupbearer and a baker, who have both been locked up, and one night they each have a troubling dream. And Joseph, the dreamer, turns out to be a reader of dreams. He tells the cupbearer his dream means he will be restored to his position in 3 days, and he tells the baker more grimly that his dream means he will be executed in 3 days. And it happens exactly as Joseph said. The cupbearer goes free, and Joseph asks him one thing: remember me, mention me to Pharaoh, get me out of here. And the cupbearer walks out of that prison, back into his good life, and forgets Joseph completely. For 2 more years. 2 more years in a dungeon for a crime he did not commit, forgotten by the one man who could have helped him. And then, one night, Pharaoh himself has a dream that no one in Egypt can explain. 7 fat cows come up out of the Nile, and 7 gaunt, starving cows come up after them and eat the fat ones, and 7 healthy heads of grain, swallowed by 7 thin, scorched ones. Pharaoh wakes up disturbed, and none of his wise men can tell him what it means. And suddenly the cupbearer remembers. There was a man in prison, a Hebrew. He interpreted my dream, and it came true. So they rush Joseph out of the dungeon, clean him up, and bring him before the most powerful man in the world. And Pharaoh says, I hear you can interpret dreams. And Joseph, standing in front of a king who could kill him with a word, says something that tells you the pit and the prison have changed him. I cannot do it, he says. But God will give Pharaoh the answer he needs. He deflects the credit straight to God, and then he interprets the dream. 7 fat cows and 7 good heads of grain are 7 years of great abundance coming to Egypt, and the 7 starving cows and withered grain are 7 years of famine that will follow, so severe it will swallow up all the memory of the good years. God is warning Pharaoh so that Egypt can prepare, and Joseph does not stop at the interpretation. He gives a plan. Store up grain during the 7 good years, so the country can survive the 7 bad ones. And Pharaoh looks at this Hebrew ex-prisoner and sees wisdom that none of his own advisors had, and does something almost unbelievable. He puts Joseph in charge of all of Egypt, second only to Pharaoh himself. In a single day, the forgotten slave in the dungeon becomes second only to Pharaoh himself in all of Egypt. And exactly as Joseph said, 7 years of incredible harvests come, and he stores up grain in staggering quantities, so much that they stop keeping count. And then the good years end, and the famine comes, and it is not just in Egypt, it is everywhere. The whole region is starving, and there is only one place in the world with food, because one man listened to a dream and prepared. People come from every country to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph. And back in the land of Canaan, an old man named Jacob and his sons are starving too. And Jacob hears there is grain in Egypt, and he sends his 10 older sons, the same 10 who threw their brother in a pit and sold him for silver, down to Egypt to buy food. He keeps only Benjamin, Rachel's other son, at home because having lost one son of his beloved wife, he cannot bear to risk the other. And so 10 guilty brothers travel down to Egypt, and they come before the governor who controls all the grain, the man who holds their survival in his hands, and they bow down to the ground in front of him, and they have no idea. They do not recognize him, but he recognizes them. The governor of Egypt, the man they are bowing to, exactly as the sheaves and the stars once bowed, is the brother they sold. Joseph could have ended it right there. He had absolute power, and the 10 men who ruined his life were on their knees in front of him. He could have taken his revenge in a heartbeat. Instead, he does something careful and strange. He hides who he is, and he tests them. He wants to know if they are still the men who sold their own brother, or if 20 years and a guilty conscience have changed them. So he accuses them of being spies, and questions them, and demands that they bring their youngest brother, Benjamin, down to Egypt to prove their story. And he overhears them, speaking in their own language, not knowing he understands, saying to each other, "Surely we are being punished because of what we did to our brother. We saw his anguish and would not listen." All these years later, the guilt is still eating them, and Joseph has to turn away from them and weep, and then compose himself and turn back. He is not looking at strangers. He is watching his brothers finally carry the weight of what they did. But Joseph is not finished making sure. He keeps one brother, Simeon, bound in Egypt as a hostage, and tells the rest they cannot come back for more grain unless they bring Benjamin with them. And then he does something that must have terrified them out of their minds. He secretly has their silver placed back into their sacks, so that when they stop on the journey home and open them, they find the payment returned, and they go pale and say to each other, "What is this that God has done to us?" They cannot tell if it is mercy or a trap, and every strange kindness from this Egyptian ruler feels like the ground shifting under guilty men. And when they get home and tell their father Jacob that the ruler demands Benjamin, the old man breaks. He has already lost Joseph. He believes Simeon is as good as gone, and now they want to take the last son of his beloved Rachel. "You are robbing me of my children," he cries. "Everything is against me." He refuses to let Benjamin go, but the famine does not care about his grief. The grain runs out again, and there is no choice left. It is send Benjamin, or watch the whole family starve. And so, with Judah personally guaranteeing the boy's safety with his own life, Jacob finally, achingly, lets his youngest son go down to Egypt. Eventually, they bring Benjamin, and Joseph sets his final test. He arranges for his own silver cup to be hidden in Benjamin's sack, and then has him accused of theft, with the punishment being that Benjamin must stay in Egypt as a slave while the others go free. This is the exact same situation as before, one favored son of Rachel, about to be lost, while the other brothers have the chance to walk away and save themselves. It is the pit all over again. And it is Judah, the very brother who came up with the idea of selling Joseph for silver, who steps forward. And Judah begs. He explains that losing this boy will kill their father, and then he offers the unthinkable. "Take me instead," he says. "Let me stay as your slave and let the boy go back to his father. I cannot bear to see the misery that would come on my father." The man who once sold a brother into slavery is now offering to become a slave himself to save a brother. That is the change Joseph was looking for. That is repentance you can see. And Joseph cannot hold it in for one more second. He orders every Egyptian out of the room. And then, alone with the 11 men who are his brothers, the governor of Egypt breaks down, weeping so loudly that the Egyptians outside can hear him through the walls. And he says the words, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" They are speechless, terrified. The most powerful man in Egypt, who holds their lives in his hands, is the brother they threw in a pit. And Joseph, seeing their terror, says something that is the theological heart of the entire book of Genesis, so listen closely. "Come close to me," he says. "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was not you who sent me here, but God. God sent me ahead of you to preserve life, to save your lives by a great deliverance. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Read that twice. Joseph does not deny what they did. It was evil, and he names it as evil, but he can see from the top of Egypt, looking back over the pit and the prison and the 20 lost years, that the same events his brothers meant for his destruction, God was weaving the whole time into the rescue of the entire family and countless others besides. The betrayal was real, and God used the betrayal to save them all. And then comes the reunion the old man back in Canaan never dared to hope for. Joseph sends for his father, and Jacob, who has spent more than 20 years believing his favorite son was torn apart by animals, is told Joseph is alive and he is ruler over all Egypt. The old man's heart nearly stops. He cannot take it in. But when he sees the wagons Joseph sent to carry him, his spirit revives, and he says, "I will go and see him before I die." And the whole family, 70 people in all, the entire promised nation still small enough to count, goes down into Egypt to survive the famine under Joseph's protection. And on the way, God speaks to Jacob one more time and says, "Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there, and I will surely bring you back again." And then Jacob, old and half blind, sees Joseph walking toward him, and Joseph throws his arms around his father and weeps on his neck for a long time. And Jacob says, "Now I can die, since I have seen your face and know you are still alive." The thread that was thrown in a pit is back in his father's arms, and Joseph brings his old father in to stand before the ruler of the greatest empire on earth. Picture it. Jacob, the shepherd who spent his whole life running and grasping and grieving, an old man leaning on a staff, standing in the throne room of the emperor of Egypt. And Pharaoh asks him a simple, almost gentle question. "How old are you?" And Jacob's answer is painfully honest, the summary of a hard life in a single breath. "Few and hard have been the years of my life," he says. 130 years, and they have not measured up to the years of my fathers. There is no boasting in it, no highlight reel. Just a tired, truthful man who has buried the wife he loved, mourned a son he thought was torn apart, wrestled God in the dark, and limped the rest of the way, looking back over all of it and calling it what it was: hard. And then this weary old shepherd does something no one in that room expects. He blesses Pharaoh. The lesser blesses the greater. The wandering herdsman lays his hand on the king of the greatest empire on earth, because the thread this old man carries is bigger than any throne in Egypt, and somewhere in him he knows it. And Joseph settles his family in the best of the land, a green region called Goshen, and gives them everything they need to ride out the famine. And here the text drops one quiet line that you should not read past, because the entire next book of the Bible is folded up inside it. The family of Israel settled in Egypt, and they gained property there, and they were fruitful, and they multiplied greatly. 70 people walked down into Egypt to escape a famine, and there, in the soil of a foreign country, safe under Joseph's protection, they begin, at last, to become the great nation God promised Abraham under the stars. But a small people multiplying that fast inside someone else's empire is going to look, to some future Pharaoh who never knew Joseph, less like a blessing and more like a threat. The rescue is already, very quietly, beginning to turn into a trap. But that is a story for the next book. For now, the family is together, and safe, and growing, and the old man has his son back. And near the very end, blind and dying, Jacob does one more thing that quietly ties this entire book together. Joseph brings his 2 sons, Manasseh the older and Ephraim the younger, for their grandfather's blessing. And Joseph carefully positions the boys so that Jacob's right hand, the hand of the greater blessing, will land on Manasseh, the firstborn, where it belongs. But the old man crosses his arms. He lays his right hand on the younger boy's head, and his left on the older, and he blesses the younger above the firstborn. Joseph tries to correct him, thinking his blind father has simply gotten the boys confused, and moves to switch the hands. And Jacob refuses. "I know, my son, I know," he says. "The younger will be the greater." Of course he does it this way. This is the man who was himself the younger twin, who wore a disguise to take the blessing meant for the firstborn. He has watched this pattern his entire life. Cain and Abel, Ishmael and Isaac, Esau and Jacob, Leah and Rachel. Again and again in this book, God reaches right past the one the world would pick, the older, the stronger, the obvious choice, and lays his hand on the younger, the weaker, the overlooked. The blind old man crossing his hands is Genesis telling you, one last time, that God's choosing does not run on human rules. And here, in Egypt, the book of Genesis begins to close. Jacob, now called Israel, lives his final years surrounded by his sons, and before he dies, he gathers all 12 of them and blesses each one. And the blessings are really prophecies, and they answer a question you may have been carrying this whole time. Because the great blessing does not go to the oldest, the way everything in that world says it should. Reuben, the firstborn, who by every rule should inherit the leadership and the double portion, is passed over. Unstable as water, his father says over him, "You will no longer excel," because he had defiled his father's bed. The next two in line, Simeon and Levi, are passed over as well for their cruelty and their violence, and Jacob says they will be scattered among the tribes because of it. One by one, the sons who stood first in line disqualify themselves, and so the blessing falls, the way it has fallen all through this book, right past the obvious heirs, and it lands on the fourth son, Judah, the one who sold Joseph and then offered his own life for Benjamin, the one a wronged widow once shamed into becoming a better man. To Judah, the fourth son of an unloved wife, Jacob gives a strange and towering blessing that the scepter will not depart from Judah, that a ruler will come from his line to whom the nations will belong. Remember that. The promise, the kingly thread, is now pointing at one specific son, Judah. And then Jacob makes Joseph swear to carry his body out of Egypt and bury him back in the land of the promise in the cave of Machpelah, where Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Rebekah already lie. And Jacob draws his feet up into his bed and breathes his last and is gathered to his people. And Joseph, keeping his oath, carries his father's body all the way back to Canaan and buries him in that cave, the one small piece of the promised land the family actually owns, and then returns to Egypt. The generations are almost complete. Only Joseph is left. And Joseph lives out his days in Egypt and sees his grandchildren and grows old, 110 years old, the text says. And with his brothers still afraid, even now, that he will finally take revenge for what they did, he gathers them one last time and reassures them with the same truth he gave them years before. Do not be afraid. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to save many lives. Am I in the place of God? He forgives them completely, to the very end. And then Joseph does the thing that this entire, enormous creation to Egypt story has been walking toward, the thing we saw all the way back in the hook. Knowing he is about to die in a foreign land, at the top of a foreign empire, Joseph gathers his family and makes them swear an oath. God will surely come to your aid, he tells them, and when he does, you must carry my bones up from this place. He believes, with his dying breath, that Egypt is not the end of the story, that God is going to come, that this family is going to leave, that the promise made under the stars, and before that, in a garden, is still moving, still alive, still unfinished. And so Joseph dies, and he is embalmed, and he is placed in a coffin, in Egypt. We started in the dark, before there was anything at all, with a voice speaking light into a formless world. And we have ended in the dark of an Egyptian tomb, with a wooden coffin and a promise still unkept. And in between, we followed one thread, not 5 separate Sunday school stories. One story, a single promise, made in a garden over the wreckage of the first disaster, that out of the woman's line would come one who crushes the thing that ruined everything. And we watched that promise nearly die, over and over, and refused to die every time. Look at who carried it, a murderer's replacement, a drunk on a boat, an old man who lied about his wife twice, a cheat who stole a blessing in disguise, a family so jealous they sold their own brother into slavery. These are not saints. Genesis is almost embarrassingly honest about the people God chose, and that is the point. The thread did not survive because the people holding it were good. It survived because someone stronger than them was holding on too, refusing to let go, even when they gave him every reason to. The same God who walked between the pieces in the dark, alone, and swore, "If this promise fails, let it fall on me." And that is why the coffin is not a defeat. Joseph could have been buried like a king in the grandest tomb in Egypt. Instead, he had himself put in a plain box and made his family swear that when God came for them, and he was certain God would, they would carry his bones out of Egypt and home. That coffin is not an ending. It is a bookmark. It is a dead man's act of faith that the story is not over, that the promise is still moving, that one day a door is going to open and this whole family is going to walk out of Egypt toward everything they were promised. Genesis does not end resolved. It ends leaning forward on purpose, with its hand still gripping the thread. And here is where it becomes a mirror, because you have almost certainly felt like one of these people. You have made the wrong choice and lived east of the garden. You have waited on something that took far too long. You have been thrown in a pit by people who should have loved you, and sat in a prison you did not deserve. And the whole shape of this book is one sentence Joseph says at the end of it. You meant it for evil. God meant it for good. Genesis does not promise you a life without pits. It promises you that the thread does not break, and that the one holding it can weave even the betrayals into a rescue you cannot see yet from the bottom of the hole. So subscribe, because the coffin was left in Egypt on purpose, and the very next book picks it up. 400 years later, a baby is going to be pulled out of that same Nile. A people are going to walk out of Egypt in the middle of the night, and someone is finally going to remember to carry Joseph's bones home. The thread we followed from the garden runs straight into the Exodus, and it does not stop there. It runs all the way to the one the very first promise pointed at, the offspring who would finally crush the serpent's head. We are going to follow it the whole way, and the video on screen right now goes back to the very beginning, to the garden itself, and the one question this whole book leaves hanging. Who was the serpent really, and where did it come from? Go ahead and click it. The thread is still moving.